Am I right in assuming you can see my screen?
Not yet. Yeah, there it goes.
Okay. All right. So welcome to day 40 of the online AWD1115 database-driven website development 2 class. We are halfway done after today. The plan is today we will finish up 12.1, the updated trips log, and we will begin chapter 13, the bookstore website. I do want to mention to everybody before we get started, I graded yesterday. To my knowledge, everything that you've turned in has been graded and Inside Rankin has been updated. That said, if you turned, if you turned in something and you think I didn't grade it, send me an email as soon as you can and let me know what that is. Now, with some of you, you might say, hey, I did this and I did this. Well, with a couple of people, I brought your stuff up and I ran it and it didn't run. It didn't do anything, or it gave me an error right away. So I didn't count that as being done. So if you disagree with what I said, just send me an email. All right. It's totally possible I missed something. I never do it on purpose, but all right, my internet's been a little flaky today. For chapter 13, we are not going to do any assignment other than this bookstore website. So yes, it's in the book, but we're going to use our version and we're going to try, we may make a few other changes to it as well. And we'll be working on the bookstore website, hopefully then for the rest of this week, with Friday being our typical lab day. Starting next Monday, we will begin work on the final project. What that means is it's going to be done a little bit in stages, but I'm going to give you requirements and those will be in stages also. So I will give you your first set of requirements by the end of the week. Your chapters 10, 11, and 12, written tests, should have been tests, labs, and homework will be due by midnight this Sunday. Now, again, it's probably about half of you in the class. I have not written any of these. Let me just show you real quick. I don't want to waste my time or yours, but I want to show you something here. When I go out to Inside Rankin, my Inside Rankin doesn't look exactly like yours. And what I mean is, when I go to Inside Rankin and I log in and I go over here, you may or may not notice there's a thing here that says early alert messages. All right. What I'm supposed to do is if somebody currently has a grade that is D or below, I'm supposed to immediately send one of those out. Now, the good news is no one in this class has a D or below. The bad news is that is because when we go out here, and I'm not going to show anybody's information because that would be totally wrong. All right. But if I go out to academics and I go out to this class and I go out to coursework, all right, this will not show anybody's stuff, but you'll notice that there is stuff missing. So the last two hands-on tests, according to this, two people don't have theirs turned in. When we look, the chapter 6 stuff, several people still don't have the stuff turned in. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm alerting everybody, all right, that if you've got late work, you can still turn it in. You will lose some points. It's not fair for the people who turned their work in on time. All right, for me to give you full credit, but you'll get most of the credit. I've said this before. Let's say you take a test and you would normally have gotten a 70 on it, let's say, but you lose 20% because it's late and you get a 50. A 50 is going to help your overall grade, much more than a 0 will. All right. All right, so with that said, let's get into it. Where we left off last time was we talked a little bit about the repository pattern and some other stuff. All right, I went online and was looking for good articles on this, and I found a couple. And then I went back and reread this first one here that's called Unit of Work C#, and I actually don't think it's that good of an article. All right, but the other one, and I want to spend about 5 minutes going over this, I thought was pretty good. It's called Implementing the Repository Pattern in C# and .NET. And one thing they mention in here, if you look at the first sentence, it's a widely adopted architectural design pattern to facilitate the separation of concerns between the data access layer and the business logic layer. The reason I like it put like that is in English, what they're saying is the models are supposed to hold our data, or the models folder is supposed to hold both. It's supposed to hold both our class files that will represent our database tables and any database model or business logic that we have. If you put everything under models directly, it can get very big, very fast, very unruly. That's why, like in the chapter that we're in, if you look at it, we've started breaking it up. So in our models, we've got 3 folders. We've got a data or a domain models folder, and that domain models folder holds right now the only thing that it holds, our classes that will become our tables. All right. We've got our view models, which hold just that, our view models. All right. And finally, we've got this new thing that we've put in here called data access. It has 2 things in it. It has now our configuration folder, which has basically our seed data in it, or the setup for our seed data. It has in it our context file, and it also has in it this iRepository and repository, iUnit of work and unit of work, and the query options file. All right. All of those files have to do with databases, and they all have to do with database transactions. And one of the things we ended with last week was we were talking about transactions, and we were talking about concurrency, and the idea, not with what you're doing, but in a quote, real live application, unquote, where many people could conceivably be working on the same database at the same time, you can have problems with 2 people trying to basically write to the same record. And we also mentioned on this the other day 2 things. There's 2 possible solutions. One of them, which for lack of better words is pretty doggone terrible, is referred to as the last in wins. All right. And with the last in wins, if you and I are both writing to the same record and I write to it, and then you get done and you write to it later than me, your changes overwrite my changes. That's not good. The other way around this that we talked about is being able to do things. Either lock things, and I mentioned this, where you can literally lock an entire database, or you can lock an entire table in a database, or you can lock a record. All right. Well, the most liberal, the best one of those, when you think about it, would be, or the let's do it the other way. The worst would be to lock a database, because if I'm going in and making a lot of minor changes to one table, and that database has many, many tables in it, and you want to change a different table, no, I'm locking you out. All right. But some places do it like that, where they lock things on a database level. All right. Tables, kind of a mid ground, But if I've got an employee table and I'm checking, let's say that it has millions of records in it, and I'm working with record 1000, and you want to go and add some new records, all right, well, then you're kind of hosed because you're not able to do that because I've locked it on a table level, all right? But the other way of doing it, probably the best way, is to lock it on a record level. Now, I think I may have misspoke last week because imagine that I open up the database and I now am working on a record in the database. Let's just say it's record 10. Now you come in and you try to work on the same record. All right. If you come in and try to, for example, to write that change in, you will be denied. You will be told that that record is already being opened and used by someone else. Try again later. That's why really that's pretty much the best mechanism. All right, to make sure nothing is overridden from anything else. All right. So with that, let's jump back into this quickly. All right. Because I like the definitions and the way they explain things here. Again, the repository pattern is an intermediary between the business logic and the data storage. This data storage, rather. As it says, it's an interface for performing CRUD operations while encapsulating the complexities of data access. What does that mean? That means that you're able to do certain things. And if somebody else has written the logic, you don't have to understand the underlying logic. You just have to be able to use it. Now, one of the things I've mentioned before in earlier classes, not this one, but like I think I brought this up in the JavaScript AWD1000 class, and that is, and it's something you should all understand, and that is the difference between an interface and an implementation. All right. And I've given this example before. Maybe it's not a great one, but I've come out here, brought up the calculator, put in a number. It doesn't matter what it is. Hit the square root key. Oh, wrong key. Try it again. All right. Hit the square root key. Okay. I don't know inherently how that is figured out. I don't know. My interface is to see this and know what I want to do. All right. So, like I said, if I put in some hairy number here and I hit that key, I don't know how it figured that out. I don't care how it figured it out. I do care whether or not it's right. All right. But the implementation, how it works under the hood, is hidden. I only see the interface. The other thing that's nice about that is if the implementation changes, let's just assume for a second somebody finds an even better way of doing square roots. So instead of getting it this fast, now we get it that fast. All right. Which may matter in some kinds of applications. All right. So as long as my interface doesn't change, you can completely change the implementation. All right. And I'm none the wiser other than I might get my information back faster. So basically, the interface is, for lack of better words, what the end user sees. And the implementation is what happens under the hood. All right. And those aren't the greatest definitions, but hopefully they're good enough that that makes sense to everyone. All right. Now, what they talk about here is, notice it says this separation enhances modularity, code reusability, and facilitates development and maintenance. It does even more than that. All right. Because in a big database project, you could conceivably have scores, if not hundreds of people working on it. So it becomes more and more important that you're able to modularize things, segregate things out that belong together into different types of modules. And that's what they're talking about in here. And I'm not going to read any of this. You know what separation of concerns is already. You should have an understanding of that. Any one of you could go on for a job interview and be asked, hey, give me an example of separation of concerns. Now, I wouldn't use this example, but as an example, I'd say, well, when you're talking about building a basic web application, the idea is, in an ideal world, you will separate your HTML files out from your CSS files out from your JavaScript files. That way your HTML will hold only page content and references to CSS file or files and JavaScript file or files. And the CSS will be written in external files, where it can be reused, for example. And the JavaScript, same way, will be in external files where it'll be reused. Now, one of the things, it's interesting, I'm just going to mention this to you. There was a decision made that the way that the AWD1000 class is different from when you guys took it. What do I mean? When you guys took it, if you remember, when we were in the HTML and CSS part, we went over the Halloween store and we went over the Shape Up Fitness thing. Okay? I still go over the Halloween thing, and we do that basically together. And we're gotten to the point where typically we don't even do the Shape Up. But where it's really changed has been in JavaScript. What you may or may not remember from when you were in the JavaScript portion of that class, we did the exercises that came with your Murac book. There were a thing called short exercises and another one called extra exercises. Well, we don't assign any of those anymore. Instead, a decision was made to have students go through some online free code camp JavaScript courses and mark their progress in there. Now, I wasn't part of that decision, but I work in that department. So whether I like it or not, I support that decision. But what I've started to do, because people are, to me, problems understanding things. So I have been going over the extra exercises and the short exercises in class and doing virtually all of them for the students. All right. But what they've been learning then is how to modularize things out. For example, we've been using the same CSS file for every program that we've been doing. All right. And what they'll understand as we move on is that we will use some of the JavaScript files in more than one website that we'll create. All right, so that's the separation of concerns. Supposedly, it makes it easier to test. All right, chapter 14 in our book is on testing. I'm hoping we can get to that and at least spend a class period or so on it. Reusability is a big thing, always. I've made this statement before, and I've had people kind of laugh like, oh, you're trying to be funny. Not at all. But to me, code reusability, when managers see that, it's the little ka-ching, ka-ching that goes off in their heads. Oh, we can save money by reusing code. Now, it doesn't always work that way, because sometimes what happens is as you reuse code, you keep refactoring it until it's better and better. But the idea is, at least with reusability, there's two advantages. Number one, you've already seen the code. All right. And number two is what I just mentioned. You can reuse it and ideally refactor it to make it even better. That refactoring can also include, as they mentioned here, scalability. All right. So you can, again, make it work all over the place. Many years ago, probably, I'm just going to guess off the top of my head, 15 to 20 years ago, I took a class, and the guy I took the class with was at the time a guy I was co-teaching a class with called Client Server. All right. And we took a class in downtown Chicago over, I don't know, it was like about 3 weekends. Okay. And what was interesting in the class is the guy who taught the class, it was a database class, a database management system we don't use here, but this was Oracle. And this guy was an Oracle database administrator, but he was bored being an administrator. So he took a job where he went all out to different companies, for lack of better words, kind of rented himself out to companies, worked on their databases, made it better or made them better, and charged them pretty high fees. Well, who cares? Well, the bringing this around is what he told us was that he'd go into a place and he'd look at their database setup. And the way he put it was typically it sucked. And it would probably take him 1 to 2 weeks to clean it out and set it up the way it should be. So what he would tell them was, okay, I can do this, but it's going to take 6 weeks. And they were happy as hell. Just 6 weeks? Yeah. He would guarantee his work, etc. And he'd say, basically, I don't need any help from anybody. I want to do it myself. And he would do that. And he would sit down typically the first day or two and get it done and working. He'd kind of clone it and make a copy of it. Then the rest of that time, he had basically the equivalent of a generic type of database set up. All right. And he would just keep tweaking what he had. All right. That can be involved in something like scalability. All right. So repository platform implementation. Now, might not think this is important. This so far is the most important slide. If you see this, add, update, and delete. Why is that important, Jeff? I want to show you. Because this is what we went through last week, and this is where it was blowing up. And it was blowing up because that I should have been capitalized, that U should have been capitalized, and that D should have been capitalized. We'll do that in a bit. In addition, this shouldn't say for delete int ID, it should say T entity. Once we put in those 4 changes, this will now compile. All right. So they kind of explain it in there. All right. And then they say, but the whole thing, when they talk about working on this, notice they say it defines a contract for data access operations. So it doesn't matter with entity if you're using employees or products or sales or orders or whatever. The reason that you make this an interface and you pass in entity, the reason that you do that is so that you are able to have it work with virtually any kind of database entity, or in our case, class that you might be working with. Next, it says you create repository classes that implement the repository interface. We only made one, and it was called repository.cs. All right. I don't even want to go through this because this isn't really what we did. All right. Although it's similar. Then dependency injection says to utilize this, you have to bring in dependency injection. We'll look at this in a later class. All right. And then finally, this unit of work thing. The unit of work, is you can kind of look at it, is that if you work in an application or if you work in a company, that I kind of mentioned something like this last week, where you're constantly doing a lot of transactions. So a lot of inserts, a lot of updates, a lot of deletes. It is, do you consider a unit of work a series of updates, deletes, and inserts, or is a unit of work just a single update or a single delete or a single insert? So in other words, when you're calling your save changes, are you calling your save changes after you do a lot of operations that would be melded into what's referred to as a transaction? Or are you doing it after each insert, update, or delete? And that's what they're getting to in here. I'm not going to read the best practices either. All right. But I just wanted to show you that. I'm going to send you this article. It's not the best. There are whole sections. All right. There are whole sections that you can find through the Microsoft documentation and the like. All right. And Microsoft actually has a pretty good project that it's about 10 or 12 parts that they want you to work on. So why didn't we work on that in here? It's in an older version of MVC, which I thought you might find confusing rather than helpful. What I'd like to eventually do is update that. And instead of using, I think it's version 5 that they had, updated to MVC 7. All right. Okay. So let's jump into our program. And as I mentioned to you, so I'm going to bring it up. If you don't have yours up, please do bring it up. I don't need that. And I'm going to start by making 4 changes in here. Make the I, and notice if I put my mouse there, it says these words must begin with uppercase letters, like insert. So I'm going to make that a capital I. I'm going to make this a capital U. Make this a capital D. And I'm going to change this from int ID to T entity. Now, those are the only changes I have made. All right, I'm going to save this and I'm going to run it. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but notice it now runs, and yours should as well. We haven't done diddly with this is our index.cs HTML. We haven't touched that yet. We're going to eventually get rid of the privacy, as we always do. All right, so we'll fix it up, but yours should compile. All right, if it doesn't, you'll have to let me know. All right, but like I said, it should. That's the big thing. So I want to go on and I want us to start working on our controllers. When we get done with the controllers, we're going to do our underscore layout.cs HTML file. When we get done with those, we'll have a good half dozen or more different CS or view files, different CS HTML files, and then we'll see where we are today. All right. So coming back here, I'm going to do a file save all, and I'm going to close everything here that I have that's open. All right. So for now, at least, I believe my models are done. All right. And I do believe, maybe I'm wrong. Let's see this. We call this, I think it was trip log 2, correct? Trip log 2. And I think we may or may not have a trip log 2. All right. I don't. So you know what I'm going to try to do before we do anything is I'm going to see if now we can build this. So let me close this, go into the package manager console. And from here, I have no migrations in here. So I'm going to try to do an add migration, initial setup. That's a good start. Now, there's not going to be any data in here, really. We've got our setup, so that's our schema, but there's no data because we haven't put any data in. All right. So we should be able to, hopefully at least, do our update database. And remember, no green or no red, no yellow is a good thing. And I don't have any. So now I'm going to shrink this down just in case I need it later. I'm going to refresh here. All right. And I'm going to go back. All right. And I'm going to look, and I should have a trip log too. And there it is. And if I go down to my tables, I now have an accommodations table, an activities table, a destinations table, a trip activity table, and a trips table. That's exactly what I'd want. All right. None of them have any data in them, and that's okay. All right. So I'm going to close this. I don't think I'll need this for a while, so I'm going to close that. And I'm going to start on my controllers. As always, the only thing we have in here is a home controller. All right. We're going to end up building a couple more, and we'll do those fairly soon. All right. So let's see if we can get all three of these controllers done before our first break. So I'm going to start with our home controller. You know this already. I'm going to get rid of the diagnostics. I'm going to get rid of all the loggers stuff. I'm going to get rid of all this log stuff down at the bottom. All right, so I've thinned this out. I'm going to get rid of privacy. All right, and I'm going to get rid of, or I'm going to keep this. Now, I do want to say something very quickly here, and that is this. You've noticed that in virtually every single thing that we've done in here, we've either removed privacy or we've left it in there with adding nothing to it. I by no means do I mean to demean privacy on a website. If you have some kind of a privacy policy, that of course is where you could put that in. But with the stuff we're doing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have privacy. But what I'm saying is, if you're working in a real live application for a company, you wouldn't be doing that. All right. So in our controller here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to add a repository. We have not done this before. So private repository. All right. And that may necessitate us to putting in a using statement, but that's okay if it does. Or we may have it in there already. And the repository will be trip. All right. Well, notice it's not showing it. So yeah, we will have to add something. We'll call it data. We could call it anything we wanted. And I'm going to put in here a get and a set. So immediately you can tell we're getting an error here, which means we're missing a using statement. And there it is. All right. So that fixed it. And I do believe if we put a question mark in here, that'll get rid of the, otherwise you're going to have the, you're going to have a warning right there. I don't think it'll matter one way or the other. The other thing that we want to do in here, as we've been doing, is put in our constructor. All right, so public home controller. All right, now this will be a little different or than above, kind of what we've been doing, and that'll be we're going to put in a trip log context. All right, that we've typically called CTX. And you know this already because I've told you, you can either do this where you say context equals CTX, all right, or you can do it the other way. But what we're going to add now is a little different because if you look in here right now, all right, we don't have a context, all right, but what we want to do is this. Data equal new repository. and put a space between new and repository, of course. So new repository, trip, and guess what? Here is where we put, I don't know how I did that, but I did. Here is where we put in parens the CTX, just like that. That is going to allow us to work with the database lockstep with the associated repository. All right. Now, we're only going to have an index in here. We will return a view, but it'll be a little bit more, but we have to put in about 5 or 6 lines. Hopefully, too, you realize that typically when you do something like this, when I do a var options, I want that var. The reason it's like that is that it could be working with different types of data. So var more or less is a generic, it's not really a data type, but what it does is, for lack of better words, it kind of sends a signal to the system. You figure out what kind of data I'm working with. All right. So I'm going to say here equals new. We're going to have that query options that we had from before, and that'll be for trip. All right. That's everything. Now, when I look in here, it says, well, let's see, possible null, but it's not giving me a way to fix it. I don't know. I don't think if I put like a question mark here, see, that usually introduces other errors, and it won't like one here either. All right. And of course, you couldn't put one by the order by. Now, possibly here. But that did not fix anything. So possibly here. And introduced more errors. So I've gotten to the point where when I'm working with this, there are going to be a certain number of null references that I'm, in my opinion, for whatever my opinion is or is not worth, that it's almost not worth trying to track them down. All right, it's just going to be too much work. Now, again, here, question mark. See, I put it in error. All right. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. This right here is our home controller. All right. This is everything. All right. In fact, we'll only probably get one more of these done before we take a break, because we're going to have a manage controller and we're going to have a trip controller, and each one of them are well over 100 lines. But when we look at this one, again, we are going to end up using in here our repository. We're going to be using it with the trip table. We're going to refer to anything we're working on as data. Here, for lack of better words, we're instantiating it. Here, we're going to use it, but we're letting the system know with this query options that in order for trip to do its thing, it will need to work with destination, accommodation, and trip activities. All of that stuff in order for it to be able to do, like I said, its thing. And we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to put in later, and we're going to want it in order based on the start date of our trip. All right. Now, if it was me, and you can do this or not do it, totally up to you. But I would typically do this. I would do I thought it was ordered by descending, and for whatever reason, let's see. Rename order by, okay, maybe I did something wrong. But I would want to have my newest trip first and not my oldest. They don't want it like that. They want it like this, which works just fine. It's not a problem. It's not an issue. All right. Well, now it doesn't like what I'm doing. So it says is not null here, etc. You go back and just do a bunch of control Z's here. All right. But I would think that typically, if you were going to do this, that you would want to show your newest destinations, your newest trips first, and not your oldest. But again, that's me. All right. So let me do a file save all here. And I'll just leave that up for now. And we're going to add a second controller here. We're actually going to add two more, but let's put in our trip controller. All right, so right mouse click, you know the drill by now, add controller, controller empty. We will rename this totally to trip controller.cs. All right. And this time we're going to be working with units of work. This is an entire trip. All right. The reason I'm telling you that is, yes, we'll have an index, but let's not worry about that right now. Let's go up here. All right. And the first thing we want here is private, and this will be unit of work. And again, we'll just call it data. You could call it unit of work if you wanted to. Data is just kind of a common name for working with this stuff. All right. And then I'm going to have my constructor. Okay. And again, no, I'm going to change that. So give me a second here. All right. So private trip controller, trip log content, very similar to what we just did. Context, CTX, data, but now instead of being a new repository, it'll be a new unit of work with CTX. All right, no, I don't want the I in there. All right, now it doesn't like this, so let's look and find and install. I'm looking here. I know I need the data access. I need the MVC. Got my models here. I may need, just like we did here, I may need these domain models. Let's see. Well, I thought that might make it go away, and it didn't. Namespace unit of work could not be found. Okay. Well, let's go back and look. There it is, unit of work, and it's under data access. It's not under the configuration, but it's under data access. Technically, it should have picked it up from here. We shouldn't need this one. It should be picking it up from right here. So let me double check. Private, oh, that should not be an I. So let's see what that did. It wants me to use I unit of work. But when I did it earlier, I didn't, and of course it worked fine. Work, data, controller, context, CTX, data, unit of work, CTX. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave that the way it is for right now, and we're going to see by the time we finish if we have to change that or do something else. All right, but I'm going to just, for now, I'm going to keep those errors in there. Now on here, We can do this, but again, I'm going to do it the more newfangled way. Sorry. It'll just do the redirect to action, and it'll be index and home. All right. But again, if you're more comfortable doing it the old-fashioned way, you can do it that way too. It's not really and truly going to matter a lick which way we do it. All right. So now we're going to put in an add. I'm sorry, we're going to put in an HTTP GET for an add method. All right. So HTTP GET public view result add string ID equal. And you'll notice when we look in here, again, we have a view result. We don't have an iAction result. Typically, you do an iAction result when you are doing something that's going to, for lack of better words, involve change. If you're just showing something with the idea that basically you won't be doing anything with it, you can put, I believe it would work fine if we change this and put an iAction result in it. I don't think it would matter, to be honest with you. All right, so in here, now that page 2 may not make a lot of sense to you, all right, but eventually we're going to have in our thing, we're going to have in here an add 1 and an add 2 that's going to kind of go along with page 1 and page 2. You may or may not remember that from when we did something similar to that back in chapter 8. So all right, we'll clear this up in a minute. I want to put the next line in, then we'll go back and look at it. All right, so the second line was fine. First line has got some issues. Okay, because that should be name of, and that should be trip. All right, it's giving me that, which means I need to come in here and put in my using statement. All right, and again, as you can see, doesn't like everything here. So if I wonder if I put the question mark here, see, that's not going away. All right, and I believe I get an error if I put it here. Doesn't like that either. Yeah, I get an error down there. And I believe I get, if I do something here, might be able to do this. I don't know if we can put a question mark there. Doesn't do anything. We put one here. All right. It removed all the errors, but it gave me one here and it gave me one there. And it basically here it says invalid expression term. So it doesn't know what that means. So I'm going to leave it just like that. All right. So that'll be getting, as it says, the destination name for displaying it later. Next, we need to get the data, the drop-down list. This will make more sense when you see it later. So We don't want selected activities, we want activities, but we'll fix that in a minute. All right. And again, more than anything else, what this is concerned with is what page are we on? Are we on page 1, all right, of our destination stuff, or page 2? So if we go back and we go back here to our projects and we look in here under chapter 12, all right, and that's our add trip. All right, there's going to end up, when we work on this, there's going to end up being 2 pages. And I believe this is page 1 and this is page 2. All right. So that's what we're working with, is basically where are we in here right now? All right. This handled, again, we still have the error there. Okay. But, and it'll say not all paths return a value because we're going to put an else in here right now. So that was our if, and then we'll have an else. So else, we're on page 1 because there's only 2 pages in here. Again, we've got to get the data for the drop downs, drop down list. You'll notice before it was the activities. In fact, this is an error, and I'm hoping it's going to not give me an error here, but that's what that should be. So let's see. Rename selected activities to activities. No. Good golly. I can't believe the errors we're getting here. Well, again, we'll leave it like that. So make that activities, because that's the way. Like I said, I'm working off versions I used a year ago that worked with very little problem. So I'm not sure what's going on now. So, but we're going to have another one right here because we want destinations equal. All right, so far we've come in and in here. Okay, like I said, and you already know that, doesn't like this. Private unit of work. All right, it says the type or namespace could not be found. I don't understand that. I'm looking through this. It says fixed typo in unit of work. Yeah, the typo would be to add the I. All right, it's not an I. I'm going to look at this during the break, see if I can fix these two errors, this error, and this error, and this one. I guess I got 5 errors. So what we put in so far is the get, all right, for our add method. We also want to put in a post for our add method. All right, then we'll have a little bit more. We're going to have a redirect to action result for a cancel and for a delete. It is 102. Let's take till 115. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to see if I can fix these errors during the break. I don't know if you're there, still there or not, Grant, but if you notice here, I spelled unit of work wrong. Fixes some of those errors. Yeah, I'd see a couple of them. I'm in the wrong controller. There we go. Fix that one. Right back. All right, it's 1:15. Please open up from the data access folder, open up your unit.cs file. I don't know if we didn't finish this or what happened to it, but I'm looking at it right now and actually, boy, oh boy, let's see. Maybe it is correct. So let's see. Public interface, unit of work, repository, trips, which is read only. All right, repository destinations, read only. Repository accommodations, read only. Repository activities, read only. And then that void save. All right, once I put that in, the other thing that I realized after I did that is in my unit of work, all right, in mine, and when I had it in there, I had a spelling error. I had IUN or IUI. So I had like an I there. All right. It was spelled wrong. Let's just put it that way. And it looked like it propagated over into so it was in both my I unit of work and it was in my unit of work. All right. Now open up, if you would please, your unit of work.cs file. All right. So we've got both an I unit of work and we have a unit of work. Now, I don't know last time, I don't remember. Maybe I thought we finished this and we didn't or whatever. You know what? This is not right the way that it is. All right, in our unit of work file. All right, so we're going to fix it right now. All right, we've got a public class, unit of work, I unit of work. That's good. All right, I'm going to leave all this stuff here. We're going to fill it in eventually. Okay, but I'm going to come down to here now. All right, and I'm going to look. And again, we'll come in here and we'll need, there, right, for instance, there is no constructor in here. So let's put in a constructor. Right? Now we can start putting in this stuff. And what we'll have to do for each one of these is basically change each one. So let's just start from the top here. All right, we're going to have to do something similar to this with everything we're working with. Now I'm looking here. Okay, let's see. Like that. So there is the repository for trips, and we're going to have to make one for destinations, and one for accommodations, and one for activities. I must have thought we did it before. We didn't do it before. And this is the reason those errors are propagating, and we're getting the errors in the file that we had been working on before the break. All right. So hopefully you've got all this. So I can go down and start doing the one for destination. All right, so that's the one for destinations. I'll leave that there for a second. All right, so the next will be accommodations. So there's the one, excuse me, there's the one for accommodations. And in just a minute, we'll do the one for activities. All right, so I'm going to do the one for activities. I don't know why that's doing that, but it is. We'll figure it out in a minute. Something was hold us here, so let's figure out what that is. Okay. Unknown unit of work activities. Well, let's look. Then I've got to go back to unit of work. Activities, it's right there. Huh. It shouldn't be a YS. Yeah, see, that's wrong. Well, we got to figure this one out. This, just so you know, this is just right here. This is context dot save changes. All right. And again, it's context, but something up front is what's screwing this up. So we can take that and actually do that and get rid of this. All right. See if we can figure this out. Public repository activity. This is where it's choking right here, and it's saying it's one accessor. Activities. If you look though, we still got some errors in here, but some of them are gone too. So oh, I didn't put my get in here. There we go. All right. I apologize for that. I don't know. I just thought we had done it already and we had not. I'm going to go back, believe me, before we finish this up and double check everything to make sure I haven't missed anything. So there's no errors in I unit of work. There are now no errors in unit of work. And there are still some errors that are coming up in here. Okay. Now I want to see if it's going to find these things if we do it like this. So I'm going to hit enter here and it'll give me an error. Don't worry about that. This for a second here. So see, it's still not seeing activities. So this is back in our trip controller. All right. And it's all coming on page 2. The trip view model does not contain. So let's go back to the trip view model. Trip. Page number, string destination name. No, that is the way it is. That is complete. We're not missing anything in here. Yes, we are. Right there. Inherits from. Drop down view model. Right there. Please add that. Boy, oh boy, I don't know. We did this Friday. Maybe I shouldn't be lecturing on Fridays. So add that. Did that fix it in our trip controller file? It looks like it. All right, there's no errors that are showing now in the trip controller file. So before the break, we did our get for our add method. So what is next is to do the post for the add method. So getting down to here. So remember, what is required is a start date and an end date and a destination. Accommodation is not required. However, we're going to have accommodations shown in our dropdown. So if one of those has been selected, right, if none are selected, basically it's set to 0. But if it's greater than 0, we're going to have to set that as well. So if right, I'll leave that up there for a minute. As it says, only page one has required data. All right. So we're going to basically copy that all over into temp data. But if we have stored an accommodation, we want to copy that over as well. Now we'll have an else on here that's not real long. All right. But we'll actually have two else's. This is if it worked. All right. And now we'll put an else right here, which means that when we did our model state dot is valid, it didn't work. So if it didn't work, basically what we want to do is we want to fill the drop-down list back up again. And there's two of them. There's one for destinations and there's one for accommodations. So again, if we go back here and look, there's destinations and there's accommodations. We've already handled the start date and the end date. And we're probably getting an error up above. Yep, because we're not returning. All right, so that's the else for that. But, and I'll come right back to this. This said if we're on page one, well, remember, we have two pages. So that's the end of page one right here, but we'll need another else in here that's fairly extensive. That's going to ask if we're on page two. All right. And even though it shouldn't happen, we'll put in one final else. This will be an else if, but we'll put in one final else that basically says if somehow we got stuck out in nowhere land someplace, just do a redirect to action and go to home, the index of the home page. So again, we checked already for page one. That's what we did here. And now we're going to say else if the page number is 2. And remember with that, even though we're getting all those warnings that it could be null, that anything that goes into temp data, technically at least, they're strings. So we have to cast everything into the type we want. All right, so that's what we're doing right there. We're still not done. We have to check and see if there's accommodation data in there. And if there is, we've got to add that. All right. And then we also have to go through our activities, okay, basically, and see if there are activities. So as far as this goes now, now we're talking about in here. These are those activities. All right. And we're going to add these selected activities. You'll notice that basically how it's set up again in here as basically a drop down. Okay. All right, so this is going to grab our information from page 1, which is all of our required stuff. If it works, we're basically going to send it to temp data so that we can provide a message saying that it has indeed been saved. If it doesn't work, we're going to repopulate those drop-down lists and just return back to the page where it didn't work from. If we're on page 2, all right, then we want to get that saved temp data. So previously it was on the left-hand side of the equal sign. Now it's on the right-hand side of the equal sign. We're going to use it to populate our fields with. All right. So again, that stuff that's in there, that start date and end date, is what's going to populate this right here. All right. Then we have to check again to see if there is accommodation information. And if there is, we want to add that too. All right. Now we're on page 2, so we have to check and see if there are activities. And if there are activities, all right, so if it contains activities, we got to find the ID and then cycle through and grab each and every one of those activities as well. All right. Finally, we'll know that again, the trip has been added, and we go back to the home page. This technically should never happen, but just in case it does, again, we are going to cycle back then and just return to our home page. I'm looking on here, and it looks like I have one error right now. And it's there because that should be a paren. All right, so I have no errors. We're almost finished with this one. All right. We need to provide for a cancel and a delete. Clear out our temp data. And again, we want to just go back to the home page. All right, so there's that one. Finally, we've got our delete. And our delete is going to be a post. We have to find it. And we need this for our notification message. So we can say trip to so-and-so was deleted. And finally, we need one more redirect back to home. All right, I see no error. Excuse me. I see no errors in mine. All right, so I think everything is cool. So when we cancel, there's nothing to do. So as it says, we just filled up the temp data, but we decided we didn't want to do anything with it. So we clear out the temp data and we just go back to the home page. When we're deleting, as it says, we have to know what trip to delete. So we're querying here to see which one to delete. We need to know the name of the destination. All right. Then we actually do delete it and save it. Give it in temp data, we give a message that says trip to so-and-so was deleted, and we go back to the home page. Now, ideally, when we get done and we delete, that message is going to appear up on top. And if we add one, that will appear up on top. All right, so let's do the next one, which is the manage controller. It's about the same size, unfortunately, as this one is. And I do want you to know, first of all, again, I apologize. That's all I can say for screwing up the other stuff. But if it takes us another day to do this, then it does. I'm not worried about that at all. All right. What we're going to do is in the future, we will spend one day on chapter 14, one day on chapter 15, and one day on chapter 16. All right. The reason I'm telling you that is 14, I believe, is on testing, and we'll just go over the built-in stuff that exists inside of that Microsoft gives you. Plus, there's add-on packages you can use. All right. And I don't remember if it's 15 or 16, but one of them has got more stuff in there about tag helpers. All right, and building your own tag helper. And we're going to do that when we do our project. It won't be a lot, but we'll do something just because I thought that was a fairly important topic. And let's see. So we will go through these topics. All right. In 16, this one is going to be the one that's going to be the most important. All right. And what is going to happen in chapter 13, just so you know, is we are going to go in and we are going to create the bookstore project. And we are going to have an admin area that is going to allow us to add books, update books, delete books, and do the same with authors. All right. But again, until we get to chapter 16, it will allow anybody. We won't have the ability yet to log people in, which is going to be the authentication process, and to give people roles, which will be the authorization process. So that one we'll spend more time on. We'll spend like a class period on 14 and a class period on 15. We're going to look at what's in the book. There won't be any homework. There won't be any. I might give you a written test on that just for completeness, but there'll be no homework and there'll be no labs and there'll be, probably nothing else. 16 will be the whole gamut because we're going to add that stuff to our bookstore site. Then in 17, we're going to attempt to go in and deploy our bookstore site out to the internet using Azure. All right. And hopefully we'll get that to work. People got it to work last time we taught the class, so we'll see. But then when we do the actual project, one of your requirements will be you must deploy your final project out to Azure. All right, just so you kind of have an idea what's coming up, I guess. All right. So I'm going to do a save all here. I'm going to close my trip controller, and for that matter, my trip view model. And I'm going to create one more controller It's going to be called a manage control. Is going to help do just that. All right. And it's 2. I'm going to go till about 2:30. We'll take another break. Then when we come back, we should be ready to go in and do our layout file. We'll do at least today, hopefully, our layout and our home. All right. And if we get that far, hey, that's fantastic. We'll do the layout files then for the trip controller and the manage controller tomorrow. They're not humongous, so it shouldn't be bad at all. All right. Hopefully we won't have the same kinds of problems we had before, but let's see. Better start than what we had before, so. Now, again, this is called manage controller. So what we're going to do in the home part of the manage controller is we're going to end up loading our drop-down data, all right, and basically load it into the view model and then return that to the view. So all right, and then we'll return to the view, and what we will return to the view will be our view model. Now, you'll notice, yeah, I know we're getting an error. And the reason we're getting an error is we haven't written the routine yet called load drop down view data or load drop down data. We will write that. But let's go through what we typically do first. All right. So we're going to write a post for an add method right here, then a post for a delete method here. All right. Then we will write a confirm, which will just be like that. Then we will load our drop down data. All right. So in other words, if we have a new destination here to add to our drop down list, this is how we'll do it. And now we're going to do similar things for both accommodation and for activity. All right. I don't know if this will be a good thing or not, but what I'm going to do here, hit enter a couple times, and I'm going to copy this down and put it in again and change this to accommodation. At a copy time. Oops, I thought I would, but we will. And then this one will be for activity. So we've come in and we're checking, do we have a new accommodation? All right. Do we have a new destination? Do we have a new accommodation? Do we have a new activity? All right. And we're adding the destinations and the accommodations to the drop down. And we're adding the activities to, it looked like it was a list box that's on the last page. All right. Now we're going to do another post here. And this post is going to be if we want to delete something. If we want to delete something, we're going to grab the full entity from the database. And we do that so we have the name of what it is we're about to delete. All right. And we can use that in a notification message that we will provide for the user. All right. So we just worried about adding something. And now we're going to worry about or work with deleting something. Now, right here, notice what we're checking. We're going to check this on all of them. So the first one says if vm.destination ID is greater than 0. We'll do a similar thing, accommodation and for activity, because if there isn't anything there, there's nothing to delete. What does it like here? Oh, we need to have the same things we did up here. Need save and notify message. That would make sense. I'm telling it to work with something we haven't added yet, so. All right, so that's the first one. And again, may not be the best thing to do, but I'm going to come down and copy this and put it down here because the next one will be accommodation and accommodation ID. All right, so there's the accommodation one. And finally, I'm going to copy it down one last time. And this will be for the activity. Oh, and I did skip on all these. Well, we need to save it. So need save is true on all of these. We're making changes. And in just a second, all right, we're going to have to come down and we're going to have to check that. All right, so in other words, if need save is set to true, we're going to attempt to write that to the database. All right, we're going to put it into a try catch just in case we try to remove something we shouldn't be allowed to remove. All right, so coming down here, so that's if it worked. All right, and I know that that's not readable, but I'll make it smaller so it is. So if need save, try to save it. If it's good, you say that it was, in this case, it was deleted. All right. Otherwise, you do a try catch and you say you're unable to delete it because it's associated with an existing trip. All right. And after we do that, we have to load up again. So load drop down data, which we're going to write in just a second, but that's why we're getting that error. And we'll return view index, oops, VM. All right. Now right here, there was another return. And it's interesting, this has not given me an error. This redirect to action confirm, even though we haven't written one. All right. I want to say that again. It has not given us an error in here. All right. Even though we have not written one, we are still in this delete routine right here. All right. Now that should get us out of the delete. So this should, if I go up all the way right here, yep, there's our delete. Make this a little bigger again. And now we will do that's it for that. And that should be public, not private. All right. And finally, the only thing that's left now is to actually load up that dropdown. That actually should go away now. That it's not, but it should, because you've got it right here. So that's the first one. Again, I'm going to do some copying here and make some changes. And one last one here with activities. Technically, if you want to, that can be an A for accommodations. You can leave it at D, it doesn't hurt any. And this can be another A, this time for activity. but you really don't even need to change it. That's just a random letter that we're putting there. Of course, you don't like something now. It's because that should say activity. All right, so we have written our 3 controllers, and to my knowledge, we have no errors in those controllers. All right, let's write the underscore layout.cshtml file, and then we'll take another break. You know, I was going to ask you this too. Let's see, low drop-down data. Did I spell it differently down here? Low drop-down data. I think we called it, we're supposed to pass the VM to it. There we go. All right. I just always was curious. Grant, you're the only one here, of course, so I'll ask you. And that is, do you find this class harder or the one that you took last summer harder?
I'm not sure. I think this one might be a little bit tougher for me. I think I latched onto the React stuff and just the JavaScript backend a little bit easier.
Was starting to, I mean, it sounded like you started building that project pretty early in the semester. And doing something like that, I think, is a good thing. That's why my hope is that with building this project, and I'm going to give Evan all of my code, all right, that he'll think it's worthwhile, that maybe he'll do the same kind of thing. Because I know in summer, I believe he's teaching the AWD, the class you're in right now. I believe he's teaching it in the summer. And that'll give him a project that he can do go from the get-go. I don't know which one. I mean, I guess I go back and forth between the two. This one, probably because even though I think it's a good book, I think they've got certain pockets where they leave out information or complete as they probably could be. Also, I'm not a fan of Microsoft's documentation on anything. All right, but with the other one, since it was MERNStack, I mean, there was more stuff to learn, you know, and it was all new. Mongo was new, Express was new, React sort of was new, it pretty much was. And Node you had from the get-go from day one. So yeah, okay, I just was curious. All right, so let's go into the layout file. So again, I'm going to do a file save all here, close this, and under my views shared, I'm going to bring up my layout file. And let's see. Let's start by going up on top here. All right, and working with our temp data. Right. Keep this, keep all this. I like to use the viewbag.title here, so. All right, we'll keep this, we don't have this. I don't even know if that's in there or not, it probably is, but I'm getting rid of that anyway. All right, so that's everything so far. Now let me move down to the body here. And we don't have a lot to write here. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to keep the header, but I'm going to remove everything that's in it. All right, and I'm going to get rid of the footer. We don't even have a footer showing in here, so I'm going to get rid of that. All right, so let's write the header, let's write the body, and then we'll take a break. Let's put the whole thing into a container. That's it, the header. Now we have to check to see if there is a message, and then if there is, to display it, and then for a subheader. So in other words, we got to check for this stuff right here. Whoa, BG Light Text Center. Should have said P2. I don't know how I got all that. And this thing for main right here, technically, we want this to work. We've got to bring that back after our header, like that. All right, and we've only got the one div now. Just out of curiosity, just to pique my own curiosities here. So I'm going to save all, and I want to do a build, and I want to build a solution. And it is giving me an error. It says the manage view model could not be found. Okay, because I put manager instead of manage. Hopefully that was the error. Now I've got a couple new errors. Okay. All right, this looks like it's in the manage controller, so I'm going to bring that back up. All right, and That should be accommodations. That's the problem with copy and paste. All right, and that's on me. And we did it here too. All right, and oops, that's activity, I'm sorry. All right, now it's not showing anything but warnings, but I'm going to save it and run it anyway. Or rebuild it anyway. All right, you can see I've got plenty of possible null values in here. And we haven't done anything with our home page, but I just wanted to see, make sure it was still going to run. Okay, that's good. Much better than I actually thought it would be. So it is 2:32. Let's take a break till 2:45. And when we get back, we're going to write our index.cs HTML. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about five you have to write. And the good news is literally 2 of them are about 20 lines each. One of them is fairly long. And the other, well, 2 are fairly long. So let's see how much we can get done. We'll go till about 3:15. So let's come back, please, at 2:45. Be right back. All right, it's 2:45, so I'm going to continue on. The first thing I'm going to do is go over to my home. Go to the home under views, and I'm going to get rid of the privacy. All right, then I'm going to bring up my index file and get rid of everything that's in there and start writing. Now, of course, this won't work because we don't have a trip. We do have a trip controller, but we don't have a trip view yet. So that's the head. And not much left. Let's see. Now I'm going to save it one more time, and I'm going to build it again. It was not giving me IntelliSense, so what's in line 32, it looks like. It's both places where I'm using trip. It's here. Shouldn't need a using statement because it's a view, but it's not seeing this. I think I'm just going to get an error when I write this too, when I do this. Yep. You're going to get from the top. Should be finding it. Okay, it is suggesting it wants a using statement, but it's still saying that it can't find it. Son of a gun. And it is in domain models too, where that's been declared. Trip. Okay, that was it. All right, so we're up to here. Now, this isn't going to do diddly, of course, because we don't have that yet. I don't know. Were you able to keep up there, Grant? Does yours work?
Yes, I think mine's okay. It just said localhost refuses to connect, but I think that's not a problem with my code. It's
All
just
right.
not running it properly.
All right. Well, that's it for the index. Let's go to manage, and we don't have a folder for that, so let's add that. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to close this. And under views, let's add a manage folder. And I'm going to close my home. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new view. That's going to be called confirm. Very, very small. So confirm.cshtml. Get rid of the garbage in there and start filling it up. All right, so manage has an index.cshtml page as well. So hopefully you've gotten all this. Okay, it looks like we're going to have two columns in here, and they're both fairly big. All right. I'm going to grab this um, LI right here, and I'm going to copy it down multiple times. Okay, the second one will be for accommodation. Which you probably should spell right. Then I'm going to do it again. And the next one will be another accommodation, but it'll be for accommodation phone. All right, then I'm going to copy that one down. And that'll be accommodation email. And then we're going to have one more. And that'll be for activity. All right. After the UL, button. Then end our form, end our field set, end our first div. And now we've got to put in our second column. About as long as the last one. Now, it's not exactly the same as the one up here. All right, it's not exactly the same, but that said, I'm going to copy the whole thing down and just make my changes. So let's see, what did I copy it? I copied the form too, I think. So let me get rid of that form, copy that in. All right. Now this is a little trickier because again, there's more to add here. There's no input. It's a drop down. And we've got to build 3 of these. All right, so again, probably not the best way to do this, but I'm going to do some copying in here. And then finally, there'll be another one for activity. Whoa, what the hell? Oh my goodness. Oh, Jeff. Oh, yeah, it's because I made the copy. All right, so we've got the destination, we've got the accommodation. I'm going to get rid of all this other stuff. It'll be into my UL here. Copy this one down as well. And just in case I lost you, I'll show you the entire thing in just a second. Then there's the button. That's a delete button. And that should be everything. So let me go back up to the top in case you want to see all of it. All right. So I'll leave that up there for a second and start moving my way down. And you know as well as I do that the foibles of copy and paste. So I hope I didn't make any mistakes, but it's quite possible that I did. Just to be sure, I'm going to save this and I'm going to build it again to see if I have any errors. And I do. Malform tag helper. Okay, I lost my beginning form there. It says delete, which means all that should be moved over one. Doesn't like that. Oops. Well, just like before, I may need that using statement. This is supposed to be our manage index right here. All right. I look, I'm going to make sure I didn't put it in my confirm in or my home index, which knowing me, I could have done. Well, it says it's in there. Okay, I'm going to try to grab that using statement. Put it in there. It doesn't like that. All right, we've got two more files to add, and they're short. So I'm going to stop right here, figure out my error here, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay, the one file is 45 lines, and the other one is like 25 lines. I wouldn't mind doing them today, but I got to fix what error I just introduced into here. All right, I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.